My mother-in-law suddenly moves into our house uninvited with her sister, and when I said, "This isn't a hotel," she laughed, "It is now." I bit my tongue until I saw what they did to my bedroom. You took our bed?" Margaret scrolling on my laptop, "It's just stuff. You'll get over it." It started on a rainy Wednesday in March, the kind of day where the clouds sink so low they scrape the tops of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the air smells like wet earth, and I have lost patience. I came home that evening, tired after a long shift at my flower shop in downtown Asheville. The place had been packed all day with people panic buying flowers for the first farmers market of the season. I was hoping to kick off my muddy boots, pour a glass of wine, and collapse onto the couch. Instead, I pulled into the driveway and found two unfamiliar cars, a dented Buick and a rusted-out Ford, taking up both our spots. My stomach tightened. Inside, the smell hit me first: cigarette smoke, heavy perfume, and something sour I couldn't place. Margaret was standing in the middle of our living room like she owned it. Her sister Jeanette was right beside her, dragging a massive suitcase across the hardwood floor, leaving long, obvious gouges in the wood. Dolly and Rex, their nasty little dogs, yapped and ran circles around the coffee table. "There she is," Margaret said, throwing her arms wide like I'd walked into a surprise party thrown just for me. I dropped my bag on the table, glancing around at the chaos. What's going on?" Jeanette was already easing herself onto the couch, lighting up a cigarette like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We're moving in for a while," Margaret said. "Things in Charlotte got complicated." I stared at them, feeling the blood drain from my face. "Moving in? Without even a phone call?" I took a breath and said, "Margaret, this isn't a hotel." She laughed, a deep, grating sound that bounced off the walls. "It is now." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Margaret and Jeanette didn't treat it like a temporary visit. They treated our house like it was an all-inclusive resort they had paid for. Jeanette camped out in the living room, her ashtray overflowing on the coffee table. Margaret commandeered the kitchen, cooking greasy, heavy meals and leaving the mess for me to clean up later. Our refrigerator filled up with tubs of margarine, expired yogurt, and off-brand sodas. The dogs peed in the corners, scratched up the baseboards, and barked all night in the shadows. At first, I thought, Travis will handle it. He'll be home soon. He'll fix this. But when Travis got home after his conference, it was clear he was just as overwhelmed, and, worse, paralyzed by guilt. Every time he tried to set a boundary, Margaret would slap his arm and say something like, "Oh, lighten up, it's family." Then Jeanette would mutter about how they'd been through enough already. I slept terribly. Every creak of the floorboards jolted me awake. I couldn't walk from the bedroom to the bathroom without stepping over one of their dogs. I couldn't even sit in my own living room without feeling like an intruder in my own house. Still, I bit my tongue. I told myself, be patient. Be generous. It's just temporary. Weeks passed. Temporary started to feel permanent. Margaret started taking my car without asking. She'd leave my flower shop deliveries late, leading to angry phone calls from brides and grieving families alike. Jeanette started having her friend over, a leathery old man who smelled like gin and mothballs. They'd sit out on our back deck until late, blasting old country music and laughing loud enough to wake the neighbors. I kept taking pictures. At first, just from the damage, the cigarette burns on my favorite armchair, the gouges in the floor, the broken screen door. But then I started taking pictures of everything: how they'd rearranged my kitchen cabinets, how my guest towels were being used to mop up dog messes, and how the recycling was overflowing with empty wine bottles. I didn't even recognize my own house anymore. And still, I said nothing. Until the day I came home early. The shop had closed early because of a storm rolling in. I pulled into the driveway, water sluicing off my windshield in heavy sheets. The house was too quiet. Even the dogs weren't barking. I pushed open the door, shivering from the cold, and immediately noticed the silence. And then I saw it. The bedroom door was open with just a crack. I pushed it wider. At first, I thought I was in the wrong room. The king-sized bed that Travis and I had saved up for, the one with the carved oak headboard we picked out together, was gone. In its place were two grimy twin mattresses shoved together, stained and sagging. My embroidered quilt was crumpled on the floor, trampled with muddy paw prints. My vanity, the one my grandmother had given me, was broken, the mirror shattered and shoved into a trash bag in the corner. Margaret was sitting on the bed, scrolling through my laptop with one hand while spooning something out of a yogurt container with the other. I just stood there, numb. You took our bed?" I managed. Without even looking up, Margaret said, "It's just stuff. You'll get over it." Something inside me cracked open. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I turned around, walked calmly to the hall closet, grabbed a trash bag, and started packing. Not my things. Theirs. Margaret heard the rustling and finally looked up. "What are you doing?" "Preparing," I said simply. I called a locksmith. I called a moving company. I called Travis. When he answered, I said, "You need to come home. Now." He did. When he walked into the house, his face crumpled. He looked from the broken vanity to the garbage bags of his mother's belongings and slumped against the wall like the air had been knocked out of him. "I can't do this anymore," I said. "If they stay, I go." Margaret came barreling into the room, shouting about ungrateful witches and family obligations. Jeanette waddled in after her, waving a cigarette like a tiny white flag of war. But I had all the pictures. I had all the evidence. And when I told Margaret we would be filing an official eviction notice if she didn't leave willingly, the color drained from her face. It was a long, ugly 2 days. They accused me of abandoning them. They accused Travis of betraying his blood. They told anyone who would listen, neighbors, friends, the cashier at the grocery store, that we were heartless monsters. I didn't care. The day the locksmith changed the locks was one of the best days of my life. The house was a wreck. We had to replace the couch, repaint the walls, pay to repair the floors, and fumigate for fleas. But slowly, inch by inch, we got our home back. Travis went low contact with Margaret after that. He needed therapy. We both did. But we rebuilt. We survived. And I learned something I'll never forget: sometimes the most important act of love you can show yourself, and your marriage, is refusing to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. The first few days after they were gone, I walked around the house like a ghost. It was strange how silence could feel so thick. The living room, once full of cigarette smoke and laughter that didn't include me, was eerily quiet. No dogs barking at the slightest creak. No Jeanette cackling over her gin and tonics. No Margaret criticizing the way I arranged the throw pillows. I didn't miss it. Not for a second. But that didn't mean it was easy. Travis barely spoke those first couple of nights. He spent hours in the garage, fixing things that didn't need fixing, oiling hinges, tightening screws that had no reason to be tightened. I gave him space. I needed space too. I spent my time cleaning. Not just the physical mess, though there was plenty of that. It was the emotional dirt, the sticky residue of resentment and violation, that clung to everything. I threw out every towel they had used, every blanket, every pillow from the guest room. I scrubbed walls until my hands were raw, even though the cigarette smell still seemed embedded in the paint. I boxed up what few belongings they had left behind, an ugly ceramic cat, a cracked photo frame, and drove them to Goodwill without a second thought. At night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me, too wired to sleep. The house still felt haunted. Not by ghosts. By betrayal. 2 weeks after they left, I got a call at the shop. It was Margaret. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail instead. "You think you've won?" she sneered. "Family doesn't just go away, Helena. Blood is forever." I played the message once, then deleted it. That night, over dinner, grilled chicken and asparagus, something simple because neither of us had an appetite. Travis finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked up from my plate. His hands were shaking. I should have stood up for you. From the start. I didn't say anything. He pushed his food around his plate. It's not just about them. It's about me. I hate conflict. Always have. You know that. But that doesn't excuse what I let happen here. Still, I stayed silent. "You're my wife," he said. His voice cracked. "You're my family. Not them. You." Something inside me, tight and aching, loosened a little. I set my fork down carefully. "I know," I said. And I did. I knew Travis loved me. But love without boundaries is a garden with no fence. Eventually, the weeds take over. After that night, things started to change, slowly. Travis began seeing a therapist once a week, working through the guilt and obligation his mother had instilled in him since childhood. I started therapy too, but separately. I needed a space that was just mine, where I could process the anger, the helplessness, the violation. We agreed on new house rules: no uninvited guests. No overnight stays longer than 3 days, period. Any family issues would be discussed and decided together, not unilaterally. We weren't just cleaning the house. We were rebuilding the foundation. Of course, Margaret didn't make it easy. She sent letters, long, rambling screeds about ungrateful children and evil daughters-in-law. She tried to recruit Travis's cousins against us. She even showed up at my shop one afternoon, standing outside the window with her arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd personally ruined her life. I called the police that time. They issued a trespassing warning. The next day, she left a dead bouquet of roses, black and wilted, on the hood of my car. It was almost laughable. Like something out of a bad Lifetime movie. But still, the damage had been done. Not by the threats. Not by the drama. By the fact that it had ever been allowed to happen at all. I couldn't help it. Every time Travis forgot to take the trash out, every time he left his dirty socks on the floor, a tiny voice whispered, "Remember when he didn't stand up for you?" I hated that voice. I didn't want to become bitter. I didn't want to poison what was left. So I fought back, not against Travis, but against the bitterness. We went on hikes together, back into the Blue Ridge Mountains, just the two of us and the endless green. We repainted the guest room, choosing a soft blue that made the light feel gentler. We bought a new bed, not a king size this time, but a sturdy queen that fit the room better. We didn't talk much about Margaret. Sometimes, healing isn't in the talking. It's in the quiet spaces you rebuild together. One evening, sitting on the porch swing with a glass of wine in hand, I asked him, "Do you miss her?" Travis looked out over the yard, where the early fireflies were starting to blink against the dusk. "I miss the idea of her," he said finally. "The mother I wish she had been." I nodded. That was the real grief, wasn't it? Not losing what you had, but losing what you hoped for. Not everyone stayed silent about what happened. Small towns, even ones as big as Asheville, have long memories and loose lips. Word got out about Margaret and Jeanette being thrown out of our house. I could feel it at the farmer's market when customers who used to linger at my flower stall suddenly rushed their purchases. I could feel it at the grocery store, the way two older women from church whispered behind the canned beans aisle. Jeanette's version of the story painted us as cold-hearted villains. According to her, we had promised to let them stay indefinitely, then heartlessly kicked them out onto the streets like stray animals. She left out the cigarette burns, the stolen car rides, the bedroom invasion. She left out everything that mattered. At first, I tried not to care. I told myself their opinion didn't change the truth. But it still stung. I kept my head down and worked harder at the shop. Flowers didn't gossip. Roses didn't point fingers. Tulips didn't ask passive-aggressive questions like, "How's your family these days?" But it wore me down. Travis saw it, even if I tried to hide it. He started picking me up from work more often, just to be near me. Sometimes we'd drive out to the Blue Ridge Parkway after closing time, roll the windows down, and let the mountain air wash over us. We wouldn't talk much. Just drive. Some nights, after locking up the shop, I would walk down to Pack Square and just sit on a bench, watching the lights blink on in the historic buildings, listening to the faint sound of music drifting from the buskers at the corner. It was during one of those evenings, sitting alone, that my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Another unfamiliar number. I played it without thinking. It was Margaret. Her voice was slow, heavy with what I guessed was wine. "You think you're better than us," she slurred. "You think money and your little flower shop make you special. But you're not. You're nobody. And Travis? He'll see that soon enough." I deleted it immediately. But her words stuck, slimy and heavy in my brain. The next week, someone vandalized the shop. It wasn't catastrophic, a smashed flower pot, graffiti scrawled across the back door, but it rattled me. Especially when I realized the graffiti spelled out one word: snake. The police came and took a report, but there wasn't much they could do without evidence. Travis wanted to install cameras immediately. I didn't argue. Still, the feeling of violation deepened. It wasn't just my home anymore, now they were trying to take my safe place too. I started locking the shop door during business hours, only letting in customers I recognized. I installed a doorbell camera at home. I double-checked the locks twice before going to bed. Safety, once something I never thought much about, became an obsession. Travis saw the changes. He didn't push me to talk. He just stayed close. One night, after another restless sleep, I found him downstairs in the kitchen, packing a cooler. "What are you doing?" I asked, rubbing my eyes. "Taking you away for the weekend," he said simply. He'd booked a cabin up in Banner Elk, a tiny town tucked even deeper into the Blue Ridge Mountains, where the cell phone service was spotty and the air smelled like pine and moss. I didn't argue. I packed a bag and we left within the hour. The cabin was small, just one room, a fireplace, and a sagging couch that smelled faintly of wood smoke, but it felt like a sanctuary. No neighbors peeking through the windows. No angry voicemails. No graffiti. Just us. The first night, we cooked hot dogs over the fire pit and drank cheap wine out of plastic cups. I stared into the flames for a long time before finally saying, "I don't know how to stop being angry." Travis didn't answer right away. He poked at the fire with a stick, watching the embers swirl upward. "You don't have to," he said finally. "Not yet." It wasn't permission to wallow. It was permission to feel. For the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not the angry, silent tears I'd shed into my pillow. Real, racking sobs that made my chest hurt. Travis didn't try to shush me. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just wrapped his arms around me and held on. I cried for the home that had been violated. I cried for the marriage that had almost cracked. I cried for the woman I had been, patient, accommodating, hopeful, and for the woman I was becoming, harder, maybe, but stronger too. We stayed up until the fire burned down to glowing coals. We didn't say much after that. Words weren't needed. When we came home, the house smelled like lemons, the cleaning crew had come while we were gone, and the security cameras blinked reassuringly from their posts. There were no new voicemails. No new graffiti. Just silence. I stood in the living room for a long moment, breathing it in. Home. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was ours again. The following weeks passed quietly. Margaret didn't try to contact us again. Jeanette moved back to Charlotte, where last I heard she was couchsurfing between friends' houses. Margaret stayed somewhere local, I guessed, but she kept her distance. Maybe because she realized she had finally pushed too far. Maybe because she found new people to blame. I didn't really care which. Still, sometimes when I walked into town, I felt eyes on me. I heard whispers. People love a villain, and Margaret had painted me well. There was a time I would have rushed to fix my image, to explain, to smooth things over. Not anymore. I didn't owe anyone the truth except the people who had earned a place in my life. Travis. My real friends. Myself. It was a slow process, but little by little, life started to feel normal again. The shop grew busier. Spring gave way to early summer, and with it came wedding season, frantic brides, bulk orders of peonies, and the sweet chaos that I used to love before everything fell apart. I started smiling again, real smiles, not the tight, polite ones I had been forcing. Travis and I went back to our weekly hikes. We started hosting small dinners with close friends again, people who had stood by us when the gossip mill churned the loudest. We repainted the front porch. We bought new furniture, nothing extravagant, just comfortable things that made the house feel fresh, untouched by Margaret's shadow. But still, some part of me felt unfinished. Margaret had taken so much from us, our peace, our trust, our home, and walked away without a scratch. It didn't sit right. It gnawed at me, quietly, late at night when the world was dark and still. I wasn't looking for cruelty. I wasn't looking to hurt her. I just wanted to take back some of the power she had stolen. The opportunity came, unexpectedly, from an old friend. Kara, who ran a real estate agency downtown, was a regular at my shop. She'd heard some of the gossip, of course, but she had a good head on her shoulders and didn't believe everything whispered over grocery carts and church pews. One afternoon, while picking up a bouquet for a client's closing gift, she casually mentioned that Margaret was trying to buy a small fixer-upper house on the outskirts of Asheville. "She's been going around town badmouthing her landlord, trying to get sympathy," Kara said, rolling her eyes. "But she has a terrible rental history. Multiple evictions. Word gets around, you know?" A slow, careful idea started to take root. I didn't rush it. I gathered information the way you gather kindling, small, dry pieces at first, nothing that would burn too bright too soon. I learned that Margaret had applied for a rental house, a little place near Weaverville, and that the landlord was wary because of her past. She had put Travis's name on some of the references without asking, trying to paint a picture of a stable, responsible family connection. That's when I knew what I had to do. One evening, while we were cooking dinner, I told Travis everything. At first, he was hesitant. He hated the idea of stooping to her level. But I reminded him, this wasn't about pettiness. This was about setting a boundary so hard it would echo. We agreed. When the landlord called to check references, I answered Travis's phone. I told the truth. Calmly. Factually. No embellishments. No dramatics. "Margaret Moore is unfortunately not a reliable tenant," I said. There were serious issues regarding property damage, failure to respect house rules, and repeated boundary violations. I cannot recommend her as a tenant. The landlord thanked me politely and hung up. I didn't think about it again. Until 2 weeks later, when I ran into Margaret at the grocery store. She was standing in the dairy aisle, staring furiously at a row of yogurt cups, when she spotted me. Her face twisted into a grimace. "You think you're clever," she hissed as I passed. I smiled. A real smile this time. Not polite. Not forced. "I don't think so," I said softly. "I know it." I didn't wait for her to respond. I walked away, the wheels of my cart squeaking cheerfully. That night, I slept better than I had in months. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't violent. It was clean. Precise. Final. Margaret didn't get the house. She ended up renting a dingy one-bedroom apartment on the far side of town, one that allowed smoking and didn't ask too many questions. Jeanette moved back to Charlotte permanently, staying with a friend whose patience, I imagined, would eventually wear thin. Travis and I thrived. Our marriage grew stronger, tougher, rooted in something deeper than love, respect, trust, solidarity. We celebrated our 15th anniversary in a quiet cabin by the lake, just the two of us, no phones, no drama. One morning, sipping coffee on the porch, Travis said, "You know, I used to think family was the people who raised you." I looked at him over the rim of my mug, waiting. He smiled. "But it's not. It's the people who fight for you. Who will choose you. Every day." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I choose you," I said. "And I choose you," he answered. Not because we were perfect. Not because it was easy. But because we knew now exactly how much it was worth.